Okay, Brucham Abba, welcome everyone. We continue in Maseches Nedarim, Daf Hashavua, Daf Zayin Amud Beis. We're going on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if you say Modrani Mechama Fershani Mechama Chukani Mechashani Ochalach Shani Taim Lach Aser Menuda Anilach. So Rabbi Kiva Choichich by Lahachmer. Choichich by Lahachmer, we learned yesterday that Abayi says that Rabbi Kiva's moida that you're not chayiv malchus, because it doesn't say Rabbi Kiva machmir, it says he's choichich ba lahachmer, so you're not chayiv malchus. Amar Papa said, Benedina minach, if you say Nedina minach, that's definitely the kuliyama loy pligi da aser. Everyone would agree that you are usher in that case, and the reason is because when you say nadina minach, that is a lashon of neder. It's a lashon of harchaka. Mishamtano minach, amin cherem from yulukei ameshari. Everyone agrees that's mutter. Even if you say sha'ani oichalach, again the Ran always holds throughout. For it to be effective, you have to say shani oichalach. And the reason why mishamtana minach is permitted, because that is not a lashon of neder, it's a lashon of shamta. But you can't put someone's food in cherem. When do they argue? B'may pligi b'menuda anilach. If you say menuda anilach, if you say menuda anilach, then that's when there's a machlokes. Now, I just want to clarify. It's a machlokes, but Rabbi Akiva does not hold your chayiv malchus. Rabbi Akiva is just choichech lahachmer. Rabbi Akiva sava lishna diniduyahu. Rabbi Akiva says it's a lashon of niduya, distancing, and he's machmer. He's not certain. He's not saying your chayiv malchus, but he would be machmer. V'Rabbanan savri lishna dimishamtanahu. The Rabbanan hold it's a lashon of shamta, and therefore it's permitted. So, but everybody would agree that mishamtana is mutter. Okay? The question is nadina. I'm sorry. The question is menuda. Is menuda a lashon of detaching, or is it a lashon of cherem? Upliga de Rab Chizda. This understanding of the machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon, this understanding of Rab Papa disagrees with Rab Chizda. Why? The Hu Gavra, there's a guy, the Amar, who said Misham Tana benichse Divrei de Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, that he's putting in cherem the possessions of the son Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Also, coming to Rav Chizda, he came to Rav Chizda. Amar lei lest the chashla lahad Rabbi Akiva. Nobody is concerned for Rabbi Akiva's machmir shita that mishamtana is asar. What do you mean? But Rabbi Akiva only held menuda is asar. He never said mishamtana is asar. No, apparently Rabbi Chizda held that Rabbi Akiva even held mishamtana is asar. And he said, look, nobody is choshes to Rabbi Akiva's strict shita. So Rav Chizda holds kasav Rabbi mishamtana pligi. Rav Chizda holds that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbanan argue about mishamtana, and he's just saying that by mishamtana, nobody is choshes for Rabbi Akiva's strict opinion. Okay. That, look in the Ran on Divrei Amaschal on Zayin Amud Aleph. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines, 11 lines on the bottom. Alma Kasam B'Sham Tana Pligi. The Svirale, the time of the Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Chizda holds the reasoning of Rabbi Akiva is the Kivan the Shavi Nafshi Bahadei. Since he's placing on himself Kimesumas Le'esar, Kimeshumas Le'isar Hana, like a Shamta for Isar Hana. Kiva, again, the Kivan the Shavi Bahadei Kimeshumas Le'eser hanaba, he's coming to Asar hana, shekain parshin min ha-meshumas v'ha-menuda. In other words, Reb Chisda is of the opinion that shamta, you could create an Isser Hana like a Shamta on food. Halacha l'maisa, the Ran says we don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva. Like Reb Chisda said, nobody is choishesh for Rabbi Akiva. Furthermore, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva mechaveiroi, but not like the Rabbanan. But not mechaveirav, not against the Chachamim. Okay. Now the Gemara goes on to a new point. Amar Rabbi Ila Amar Rav, Nidahu befanav. If you put someone in cherem in his presence, ein matirin loy el befanav. You can only release him in his presence. Nidahu shaloi befanav. If you put him in cherem not in his presence, matirin loy bein befanav bein shaloi befanav. Then you can release him whether in his presence or not in his presence. Says the Ran, Nido b'fanav in matirin loy el b'fanav. What's the reason if you put someone in cherem in his presence, you can only release him in his presence? So simply you would say, well, maybe it's more strict if you do it in his presence. The Ramban learns differently. The kivan de b'fanav nido. First the Ran says, well, since you put him in cherem in his presence, alim niduye, the cherem is strong. It can only be released in his presence. Similar to what we learned in Gittin, that kol milsa de misavida beyasara, any matter that is conducted in front of 10 people, tzricha beyasara lemishlafa, you need 10 people to undo it. The Ran says this is not the pshat. The pshat is not when you put someone in cherem in his presence, it's more chamor, and you can only undo it in his presence. The pshat is a lataima de milsa. The reason is mishum chashada, because we're worried about suspicion. Dimatirin loy shaloi b'fanav. If you're going to release him not in his presence, pa'amim sheyatiruhu, sometimes you're going to release him, v'amenuda lo yada, and the guy who's in cherem won't know he's released, and when you go talk to him and deal with him and go in his daled amos, he's going to be surprised. He's not going to realize you undid it, and he's going to think that you could be lenient about cherem. When you don't accord yourself with the laws of nidoy, yavai l'chazeh is going to come to suspect you. But if you put him in cherem not in his presence, and then he sees that you're being lenient, he'll figure, just like you put him in cherem not in his presence, you also undid it not in his presence. Avol kishanidu shaloi b'fanav lekach shada, then there's no chshad. Sha'av hu savar, because even he holds shami turu shaloi b'fanav. Maybe you mattered him not in his presence, kishem shaniduhu shaloi b'fanav, just like you put him in cherem not in his presence. Fine. Amarav Chanin Amarav. Yeah.
With this round?
Sure.
So he had a Havamina both for Gemara and Gittin. And then he said that, or al Svara, that don't think of that Havamina Gemara and Gittin. So he's using the Svara to say not to use the Gemara and Gittin. So is that, how does that work? Shouldn't the Gemara and Gittin override the Ran Svara?
Okay, good question. The Gemara in Gittin is not speaking about the same point. The Gemara in Gittin is talking about, what is the Gemara in Gittin talking about? Kol milsa de savida be'asara.
It seems like the same case.
It might be talking about cherem there, right? That someone put a cherem in front of 10 people, you need 10 people to undo. So you mean from there we see that there is a concept of strength of a cherem.
Right, and he's telling us this also, but he's saying no, there's a different reason. So then, why is this reason not a good reason? What happened to this market? Or the svara is obviously impenetrable either. So.
I hear. It's good.
He just says the way the hero. He doesn't have to cast it on the way the hero. This is not the
Okay, look. The next line of the Ran is saying that this is similar to what the Gemara says on Samachei, that if you're mudar haname chaveroi bifanav ein matirin loy ela bifanav, and the Yerushalmi says explicitly that it's because of chshada. Now, by the way, the nafkamina between these two reasons, that according to the first reason, if you lemaisa did it shloi bifanav, according to the first reason, it would not be effective. But according to this reason of chshad, if you went ahead and did it, it would, after the fact, be effective. In other words, according to this, another nafkamina would be, let's say you told him, hey pal, we were materit shloi b'fanav. And so there are two nafkaminas. One is it mutter b'diavad, and one is, does it help if you tell him? I hear the Ran is more inclined to follow a logic that the Yerushalmi learns on Samachay. I hear your point. Okay, weiter. Amar Rav, Chanin Amar Rav, Hashoimeya Haskaras Hashem mipi chaveroi. If you hear your friend say the name of God in vain, some say this would apply even for brachal vatala. Tzarach lenadoisi, you have to put him in cherem. V'im loy niduhu, if you don't put him in cherem, hu atzma yehei benidoy. You yourself should be in cherem, or are in cherem, or should be in cherem. Why? Why you yourself? Shekal makom shaskar Hashem matsuya. Wherever the name of God is mentioned frequently, sham aniyas matsuya. Poverty is found. V'aniyos kamisa. Poverty is like death. The proof is shenemar kimesu kol anoshim. Hashem tells Moshe, you could go back to Mitzrayim, all the people who want to kill you have died. Namely, Dasan va'aviram. We know that they were alive. The proof is they were alive many years later in times of Kairach. V'tanya, kal makom shenasnu chachamim eineihem, wherever the rabbis put their eyes. Right, so that's a proof that Dasan va'aviram must have become poor. Even though you could say, how do you know? Maybe they became mitzayram, or they became blind. So we know they didn't become blind because later on in Karch they said, ho'inei ho'anashim ha'im tenaker. We'll see in the Ran. How do we know they didn't become a mitzayra? We'll have to see. Okay. V'tanya kamakam shenas chacham einei, wherever the rabbis put their eyes, oy misa oy oyni. There's either death or poverty. So, fine, let's see the Ran. The Ran says, Hashemeh azkar Hashem fi chaver tzach lanadosa bereish temura mafginan azhara lamasker shem shamayim levatala midachsev es Hashem leikachatira. We learn out from the words, Hashem, your God, you should fear that you're not to say His name in vain. If you don't put him cherem, he himself should be in cherem. It doesn't mean that you are automatically, for not putting him in cherem, or you are then here. The Torah automatically puts you in cherem. It means you are worthy to be put. The one who mentioned himself, he himself is not automatically in cherem. He would need to be placed in cherem. So certainly someone who heard him is not automatically in cherem. How could someone who listens and is silent worse than the one who said it himself? Ela kida amran. Even though maybe you could argue that the guy who said it just said it, the guy who heard it and was silent verified it. He authenticated it. Like Gadol ha'oina amen yoiser mehamevarech, because the one amen stamps it. But here it's not like he stamped it, he just didn't protest. Okay. Shebechol makom, says the Ran, Taima kol yohev l'mayda amrinan. The Gemara is providing a reason for that, which it said of him, Lo niduhu, if you don't put him in cherem, hu atzma yibenida, he himself should be in cherem. Why? Shahrei achshav chamor. Because now it's very strict. The shame aniyas mitzuya. The sham aniyas mitzuya. Their poverty is found. T'chsiv b'chol makom asher azker shemi. How do we know that poverty will be found where the name of God is mentioned in vain? Because God says, wherever you mention my name correctly, their wealth is found, blessing is found. Umida askaras Hashem lemitzvah mavia bracha, just like mentioning Hashem's name for a mitzvah brings bracha, va'oishar and wealth. Hazkara l'shav goyremes anias. Mentioning God's name in vain brings poverty. So this is an unknown segula for wealth. If you're mechavein, when you make brachos and you have kavanah for Shem Hashem, it brings wealth. That's an easy way to be wealthy. Inami, another proof is midachsiv gabe shvua sheker. The fact it says by swearing falsely in Zechariah v'kalasai ve'eseitza ve'savanav, it will bring destruction for even his wood and stones. It will bring devastation to your property. So that's for a false shvua. And in Timura, it compares being moitzi Shem Shamayim Levatala L'Shvua Sheker. U'v'Tmura Medami Haskar Shem Levatala L'Shvua Sheker. Shanemar Kimesu Kol Anashim. Says the Ran, Deloy Mesu Mamish. They didn't actually die. K'damrina L'Kaman B'Perek Rabbi Eliezer. The Mahavahavi, the Dasim Avim were around. The Chomakim Shanemar Nitzim and Nitzavim. Whenever the Torah uses the words Nitzim and Nitzavim, Einam Ela Dasim V'Aviram. They were in the machlekes of Karach. Because they became poor, it says they died. Don't we have other options? Maybe they became blind or a Matzaira, or they didn't have children. The Ran says it has to be they became poor. It can't be they became blind. The Ran says on the second line, because in Karach they said, Ha'enei ha'nashahem tenaker. You can't say they became leapers. It says they died in the midst of Israel. They were in the Machane, and Mitzrayim is thrown out of the Machane. And you can't say maybe they were in Mitzrayim and then they were healed, because by the Egel they went back to their Mumin. And maybe it's because they didn't have children. Well, if it's because they didn't have children, how could Hashem tell Moshe, don't worry, go back to Egypt. All the people who want to kill you, they died, meaning they don't have children. Well, that's not a very comforting reason to Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay. The next round says, Oy misa oyni ama shavalada. Do we see they're equal? Fine. Amar Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba said, Hava ke'imna kamei de Rav Huna. I was standing in front of Rav Huna. Shama lahachitza. He heard a woman, the Afka Haskar Hashem Levatal, who mentioned God's name in vain. Shamta, he put her in Cherem, V'shara la altar, and he permitted her immediately. Ba'apa, in her presence. Shma mina tlas. We see from here three things. Shma mina hashaymea haskar Hashem mipi chaver tzochan adoy. So we see that if you hear someone mention God's name, you have to put them in Cherem. Ushma mina niduhu b'fanav ein matirin loy el b'fanav. We see that if you put someone in Cherem in their presence, you have to remove it in their presence. Now, how do you see that? How do you see that if you put someone in Cherem in their presence, you have to do it in their presence? Maybe he just happened to remove it in Cherem. Ushma mina. We also see ein bein nider la'afar v'lo klum. There's no minimum amount of time you have to be in Cherem. You could be in Cherem only for a tiny bit. It could be removed immediately.
What's the idea have to do with Cherem? You never made that connection. The Aniyus is caused by shame so much. The first shame have to do with not putting someone else in Shiur.
Wherever the name of God is found, Anius is found. What's the source of that? The Ran said, well, either from the fact that where you mention Hashem's name properly, it brings bracha. If you mention it improperly, it brings oini. Or if we learn it out from Zechariah. Why is it relevant?
What does that have to do with the Gemara says two lines?
the way I'm understanding it is, why do you have to put the person in cherem? Because when a person mentions God's name in vain, think what happens. It brings klala to the surrounding area. The person could lose his money. That means the environment is affected. So just like just like the house could be affected, the listener could be affected. So therefore you are in danger. So you have to do something to get some kind of kapara.
The article says that
what?
The optimum men detain the woman until
I can't hear well. What?
The Romi Sada, and he explains it.
What? I'm not hearing. Okay, you'll tell me after, okay? Meaning if the environment is affected, the listener should also be affected. Okay. Amar of Gidda Amarav, Talmid Chacham menada la'atzmai u'meifel la'atzmai. Talmid Chacham could put himself in cherem and could remove himself. What does that mean? The Ran quotes the Rajba that this is only the case in a situation, as we're going to see, like Mar Zutra, that you're not really chayiv nidoy. It's only mimidas chasidus that you're chayiv nidoy. The Mar Zutra put himself in cherem out of respect for the Rabbanan. But if you need to be in nidoy, then you can't permit yourself. You can only permit yourself if you only did it like out of a courtesy. But then the Ran says that's not the case. You could be made for yourself in all cases, and that's the Shita of the Rambam. Let's see the Gemara. The Gemara says, Tam Chacham menada la'atzmai mefer la'atzmai. So the Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious. So the Ran says, how could it be obvious? We don't even know yet that it's limited to a case where you should not really be in cherem in the first place. So from here the Ran proves that you could always matter yourself from nidoy. Ma'u detema, I would say, in chavish mater atzmai beis asurin. Someone in jail cannot release himself from jail. Kamash malan, the chiddush is you could take yourself out of cherem. So Gemara says, hey chidami, what would an example be? Ki had Mar Zutra chasida, like Mar Zutra the righteous, ki mechayev barbe Rav Shamta, when a young rabbi needed to be put in cherem, so Mar Zutra felt it was like demeaning to the Chachamim in general. So in order to show some kind of commisery or kavod, he would put himself in cherem. So mishamit nafshi bereisha, first he would put himself in cherem, b'hadri mishamit bar beirav, then he would put the young rabbi in cherem. V'chi'ayel lebeisei, and by the time he got home, shari lenafshi, he would release himself, v'hadar shari le, and then he would release the bar beirav. Why would he release himself before he got to his house? The Ran says on the bottom line, he didn't want the people in his house to have to distance himself from him, so he first mattered himself, and then he mattered the Bar Beirav. Yeah, Rabbi Say, hold over here. Shkoyach, everyone. Kol tov. Yeah, I hear you now. Sorry.